Look, I'm gonna talk to me proper. Danger. Cutty Rankin. Stop. Them come and talk to me proper. Sienta. Culture. Cutty Rankin. Sorry. I was supposed to cut that song short, but I let it play all the way through. What do you want from me? Let me, I think that's too much. There we go. Um, every time I set up and break down my microphone setup, there's this one little button that I don't know what it means or what it does, but if it's on one setting, it picks up everything, every little noise, every little movement, every little rustle of the paper. But if I push the other thing, I think it's like noise canceling or something. Me not know, but it's better this way. But I forget to push that one button. Man, human error. Anyway, BroDiallo Show, Q4 Radio. What's today? Today is May May 24th in the year of your Lord 2021. This is Bro Diallo broadcasting through Q4 Radio, City of Chirac, State of Illinois, in the United States of America, on the ravaged planet Earth. This morning, our music selections were Murderer by Barrington Levy, Murderer, followed by the classic Rikers Island, me, no, like Rikers Island, you hear? Which is, of course, legendary Nardo Ranks and legendary Coco T. And that was rounded off by the Stopper, every DJ come and talk to me proper. By the, I can't call Cuddy Ranks legendary. He was a rude boy. I don't know if rude boys can be legends in their own way, I guess. But Cuddy Ranks. Um, I just thought some classic 90s dance hall was what we all deserve this morning. So you're welcome. Moving on. Today is the third installment of our discussion of the genocide cycle. You can go to the Bro Diallo archives, YouTube. I gotta update the website, but you can go to the archives YouTube. If you haven't liked and subscribed to the YouTube, then why? What's this game about? Why are you playing with my emotions? You can hear our previous discussions of the genocide cycle. Some of our analysis is based on the text, A Century of Genocide. We were under the myth, or we've been told most of our lives, that humanity is advancing along with our technological prowess, and therefore primitive behaviors of the past will fall by the wayside. And we're finding that humans, as we do technologically advance, psychologically, emotionally, and in a lot of ways, intellectually and culturally, we are regressing to many of our primitive ways, tribalism, brutishness, savagery. And when you combine humanity's failure to keep our intellectual and cultural development on par with our technological development, we are putting ourselves in more and more precarious situations. So we have to reconcile that as a species, as a planetary community, or we will drive ourselves like all other successful species that outstrip the capacity of their ecosystems, we will find ourselves not only driving ourselves to extinction, but destroying the life sustaining capacity of the planet Earth. So that's really the point of revolution at this point. It used to be we could just focus on liberating Black folks, securing our land, securing our rights, and securing our safety and prosperity. That was the whole point of it all. But now these folks ain't content. I say all the time, and I think this will be my first offensive statement of the day. I say all the time, white people are not content to do things the wrong way. They must, they must find a way to do things the worst way. They are not content with simply doing things the wrong way. They seek to do them in the absolute worst possible way. And you can say, well, how can you judge a whole race? Well, how can you oppress a whole race? when only, but there is this myth that only the black people, bad black people suffer, like Bill Cosby before he got locked up in Rikers Island. Him not like Rikers Island. He's never been to Rikers, any prison. Bill Cosby used to say only the misbehaved black folks end up in jail, only the bad ones. But if you're a good black, an obedient black, a submissive black, a lawful black, a citizen black, you have nothing to fear from the institutions of the American government. In fact, you will receive all the benefits that God can bestow upon you. It's another lie. But anyway, before we get into that, just set this aside. There's so much. Speaking on humanity's regression as our technological prowess surpasses us, the UN just released an alert. There's a new major famine on the way, and they jump around. They told us there's going to be a famine in Yemen, famine in Eastern Europe, and now famine has made its way back to the African continent. Technically, Madagascar, which is one of the largest island nations in the world, one of the highest levels of biodiversity and unique ecosystems in the world, and Madagascar is also a popular children's cartoon that Chris Rock plays a zebra um, with an identity crisis and a lion with an identity crisis. Yeah, I think that's one of the most appropriate characters Chris Rock has ever played. A damn zebra, black and white, with an identity crisis. It was funny. Some of y'all don't remember this. Chris Rock had a show that was kind of like the Dave Chappelle show. I mean, identical to the Dave Chappelle show, which was ironic because Dave Chappelle got mad in Key and Peele because he said they stole his show. But if you go back and look at the Chris Rock show, and then if you go back before that and look at the Richard Pryor show, anyway, I digress. Chris Rock had one skit where he did a public service announcement informing black people how not to get your ass beat by the police. And he gave various tips and tricks. And essentially, I'll give away the joke that black people were being beat and brutalized by the police because we don't know how to behave when we engage with the police. So one of his advice on how not to get your ass beat by the police was if your girlfriend is mad, leave her at home. That was one of the things. So, oh, here it is. I'm gonna just let me see, cause I don't remember, cause this it's one of the crappiest. How not to get your ass kicked. How not to get your ass kicked by the police. And number one was obey the law. Okay. And if you watch these skits, he shows black people engaging in these obnoxious behavior, and these reasonable cops will come up to black folks and beat the crap and try to reason with the black person and try to discuss. Like in one skit, he shows someone engaging in a carjacking, and that's why the police beat him. And then another one is use common sense. And then another black person, he shows a black person jumping a turnstile with a gun and warrants and drugs on them. So the reasonable cops who don't want to do anything beat. And then another one is stop immediately. So when the cops come to you, stop immediately. Instead of running, be polite to the police. What do you say? If your girlfriend is mad, leave her at home. Obey the law. I mean, it is the most Cosbyan. Is that a word now? Cosbyan? I think we need to put that into the black lexicon. It is the most Cosbyan skit. And it's not just the things that he recommends that black people do to avoid from being beaten by the police. It's the skit shows black people being obnoxious, aggressive, criminal, and the police simply coming up saying, hey, just trying to do my job, just trying to keep the peace, and black people provoking the cops. And then I think about, was it 2 years ago? Chris Rock lives in a very rich, affluent neighborhood, and when he's driving his luxury car through his rich, affluent neighborhood, um, I'm gonna share this on Facebook. This how not to get your ass kicked by the police. It's been viewed well over 21 million times. And literally this video from the Chris Rock show gets played in police precincts all over the country, in police academies. It's literally used as an icebreaker for new policeman recruits. There's an article that this is one of the most popular videos, and people who, when you go to policemen's benevolent association banquets, when you go to orientation at the police academy, when the cops are come together for the policemen's, there was the county sheriff's union or county sheriff's association came here to Chicago to meet at the big convention center downtown. Whenever police get together in big groups for their various cults and organizations, they love to play this video. But anyway, like I said, Chris Rock's driving his luxury car through his affluent white community, and the police started stopping him frequently. And he would, every time the police would pull him over, he would start taping. And that became a popular article. It's like, wow, even Chris Rock. But I guess he didn't get his ass beat. Because they get up there and find out who he is. Oh, you're one of the famous ones. They didn't want to go viral, so they let him go. For now, anyway, shame on Chris Rock for this. And then he's also another Chris Rock thing. He popularized, he didn't come up with this, but he popularized the myth that there's a difference between black folks and niggas. That there's these two separate communities, and the black people are actually aligned with the white people, and that we don't want to live around niggas. We can't deal with niggas. We don't want nothing to do with niggas, and the niggas are the ones causing the problems, not white aggression, not white pathology, not racism, but it's the niggas. And if we could do something about the niggas, and the niggas don't just do bad, they make things bad for all of us. And not only do the niggas prey upon us, they justify or they give every other group reasons to hate us and to exploit and mistreat us. I mean, Chris Rock's had some bad taste. Y'all still love this dude. It's a difference between white folks and niggas. And again, white people love to play this. I mean, Chris Rock has earned, Coon Rock has earned every dime that he has been paid throughout his career. But now he's moved on to drama and horror movies. So hopefully maybe he'll stop with his uh race treasonous inaccurate jokes. Maybe we'll be done with that for now. But moving on. Famine has returned to Africa. And now they have classifications of famine. It's kind of like Great Depression. When there's an economic collapse, they don't like saying depression anymore. So then they say stagnation or economic correction. They have all these new words, like instead of saying, you know, vicious colonizer, vicious uh, colonizer, they'll say, settlers. So white folks have been for centuries whitewashing and sugarcoating their language for the things they do. So now they talk about food insecurity or nutritional deficits instead of saying famine and starvation. So food insecurity is a thing. But what upset me about this, and I don't know, is in the headline, people keep talking about the famine in um, the famine in Madagascar is due to drought. Say, well, there's a drought. And so, what are you going to do? When it doesn't rain, can't grow crops, people go hungry, despite our best efforts. It's just an unfortunate situation, which enrages me in 2021. Now, in the 1980s, they had famine and instability in Ethiopia and Biafra. My nickname was Ethi because we, as children who had been, alienated and isolated from our history and our motherland, when every skinny kid in the hood was called an Ethiopian. And my nickname was Ethi because I was a very scrawny, very skinny kid. And we thought because it didn't rain, we'd walk around the hood, black folks, even though many of us were malnourished. We ate the free cheese while the church said believe. Many of us were malnourished, had food insecurity ourselves. I went to my grandmother's funeral, and my uncle was just reminding me of all the sugar and butter sandwiches we used to eat. And so, and at the same time, we're mocking the plight of our brothers and sisters on the African continent. But I believed way back then in the 80s that it's because it didn't rain. Those poor Ethiopians didn't have any food because it just didn't rain. Too bad for them. But it didn't take me very long to say that drought or lack of rain and even crop failures have nothing to do with famine. And how do I know this? Because for the last several years, for between 10 to 15 years, the United States has been under drought conditions. If you go to the NASA website, and NASA does the surveillance for rainfall, they track rainfall in the upper atmosphere. NASA has reported that Nevada, New Mexico, California, Utah, Arizona, that entire region has been under severe to extreme and the highest form of drought, exceptional drought, for the last 10 to 15 years. The United States has drought conditions throughout the country. Australia has suffered from drought. So the drought in southern, and you might say it's not the whole country. That's what we call the Southwest, where they wear turquoise and do racisms. That's Mormon country. Um, that's not the whole U.S., but the island of Madagascar, an island of what, almost 30 million people. There are over a million people suffering from drought. In the southern, it is isolated to southern Madagascar. It's not an island-wide drought. So southern Madagascar is has a drought that the UN, quote unquote, says is beyond belief. And the UN Food Agency official said, over 1 million people are facing starvation out of an island. I think it's 26.7 million people, almost 30 million people. But when you look at European countries, when they suffer drought conditions, there is no widespread famine. So if famine was caused by drought, the United States um, and Australia would definitely be under um, famine conditions. And since this nation, the US, has over 300 million, there'd be a much more rapid decline in the food supply if drought was the cause. But it is not the cause. The cause of famine in the modern world, and even in the ancient world, even in India, had some of the biggest famines in recorded human history. China had a severe drought. There hasn't been one, not a severe drought, I'm sorry, a severe famine. But in modern recorded history, there hasn't been one famine that could be directly attributed to drought and food collapse with or in it what I'm saying, the absence of food. Every single drought has been political, economic, not environmental. Droughts are political and economic in nature. So it is a conscious, deliberate decision made by people in power, by international bodies, to allow people to starve or to rescue people from starvation. Because the resources are there, the technology is there, the distribution is there, and the goddamn food is there. On a global scale, over 1/3 of all food is absolutely gone to waste. That means for every banana that's grown, for every 3 bananas that's grown, one of those bananas are thrown into the landfill. Same thing for apples. For every pound of meat, every 3 pounds of meat cultivated, 1 whole pound's thrown in the garbage. Over 1/3 of global food supplies are thrown away. That's 1.3 billion tons of wasted food every year. 1.3 billion tons of food. At the loss, the monetary loss of that is approximately $1 trillion US. So again, there's food. There's enough humans cultivate enough food to feed the entire human population 3 times over. It's even worse when you break it down per food substance, because 45% of all fruits and vegetables go to waste. So it's 1/3 of the total food supply, but almost half of all fruits and vegetables that are cultivated and grown are thrown away. 35% of fish and seafood, of all the seafood that is harvested from fresh and salt water, 35% of that goes to waste, meaning it's not consumed. They murder those fish and throw them back in the water or throw them in the landfill. You literally go out to the ocean, cast these giant nets, and pull these fish, these living creatures, onto the boat, murder them, kill them. Then you bring them back to land and throw them in the landfill. 35%. 30% of all grains. And by grains, those are called the cereals, the wheat, the barley. 20% of all dairy products and 20% of all meat products. Garbage. In this high-tech advanced society of Christians and Muslims and Hindus, all these God-believing holy people. And every one of the major world religions, I believe there is some teachings about waste, being wasteful. So please stop, because I see people sharing articles and sending out their thoughts and prayers to brothers and sisters in Madagascar who have a long history of fighting imperialism. Madagascar and their warriors and their monarchs have one of the most successful histories of staving off colonizers. For many years, the Europeans had to come to Madagascar and negotiate with the monarchs, with the power structure in Madagascar, because and they would do periodic invasions, and the Madagascar warriors would fight them off and drive them away, and then they'd come back and negotiate, loosen up to get a tighter grip. But then eventually, and that's the thing, we really got to study the history of colonization, because some folks act like the white man showed up and knocked at our doors and we immediately bowed. They lost a lot of lives, but they always keep coming. But anyway, that's the whole, I don't want to get into that. But all that to say, please stop allowing the corporate media, the Europeans, the UN food agencies, and these other non-governmental agencies, and the US military. That's another way that the US military uses to colonize lands, to claim they're coming in to bring aid. And why? If you're bringing me food, if you're bringing me flour and grains, why do you have a military rifle? Why are you delivering food on the back of tanks? So that's another method of colonization. A region becomes food insecure, and they politicize the tragedy, and they use that to allow the military to get a foothold into a country. So anyway, stop allowing them to promote the myth that droughts are causing famines. I'm not saying that droughts can't cause famines, and very soon, because they were saying the people who are exposed to food insecurity in the next decade are supposed to triple, and after that quadruple. And there's going to be more and more crop failures. That's why these techno barbarians are trying to grow food in skyscrapers. They're trying to set up space stations to grow food, because they know their pursuit of profit is poisoning the soil and disrupting the atmosphere, so that the planet can't grow natural food. So they want to industrialize the food system to the point where they don't even need soil, where they don't even need sunlight. And the natural means that humans and all other living creatures have used to generate food over millions of years of evolution, they want to just say, hey, we can replace that with some silicone, some plastic, and some microchips. We want to genetically breed meat in laboratories. And we want to have these giant vertical farms, these skyscrapers, where we're growing food that never touches soil and never sees sunlight. And they're not doing this to feed people. They're doing this to have even more control, because they're not just content going out to the farms and putting up barbed wire to isolate us from the land. They're like, oh, you can have full access to the land now that we've polluted it, now that we've raped it and you can't grow anything on it. Take down the barbed wires. Go. Land ain't nothing anymore. Now we're going to have literally fortresses patrolled by drones to keep you away from our vertical farms. It's easier to secure and control the food supply. And you control the food, you control everything. So Madagascar is literally a laboratory. It's an isolated population. Madagascar's drought. Madagascar used to be a lush, productive land, but because of global warming caused by European industrialization and European disregard for the natural world, is now suffering a drought. And now the UN and the Western powers have already politicized this drought and are jockeying to secure their foothold in neo-colonial Africa. And so they'll go to the Madagascar people and say, yeah, you want some food? Can we put an air base? Can we put a military base? Can you give our mining countries, our mining companies and extractive industries access to your land? And here's some rice. And give us a 500-year lease to what fertile land you have left? Or I'm sorry, they're not that obnoxious. They don't go to Africa and sign 500-year leases. It's more like 99-year leases on land where 100% Africa is one of the most fertile continents in the world, and they import about 80% of the food they consume. That is colonization, economic colonization, cultural colonization. So they don't even have to send the troops. You don't have to have British troops marching through Kinshasa, marching through Nairobi. You don't have to have apartheid government, because now they just manipulate keystrokes on a computer, bank accounts to control us. They don't need their European colonial troops anymore. It's really a sad state of affairs. But hey, you individual black folks, buy Bitcoin and secure the bag, and share your selfies from the Caribbean on the gram. It's all good. I digress. There's another pet peeve I have before I go into the topic. I'm kind of sick of y'all saying these things. When the people who oppose the COVID vaccine tried to use the Tuskegee study as a comparison or as a justification. And I understand if you're going to say, well, the Tuskegee experiment, it wasn't really an experiment, technically. And I'm getting kind of technical. Because if a black person says, I don't trust the government, I don't trust the government's institutions, the CDCs, the various health departments, and the various professionals and folks in lab coats, I don't trust them. And you reference Tuskegee, that makes total sense. But the good thing about all that is science does not require or request you to trust it. No scientist, no scientific body will come to you and say, trust us. Trust has no place in science. So saying you don't trust institutions and saying you don't trust science, that's a good thing. Scientists don't trust science. Distrust, testing, skepticism is a cornerstone of science. But you can't use your distrust of science to justify being anti-science or anti-scientific. So you should be distrust science, be skeptical of science, and seek confirmation, seek verification, seek to review the evidence, to test the evidence. And any real science will say, absolutely. And you compliment a scientist or a scientific field if you come up to test. I don't trust evolution. Show me the evidence. Demonstrate your theories, your hypothesis. How are they tested? Is it falsifiable? You can get together with communities of skeptics. But I'm seeing this distrust in the black community being used for anti-intellectualism, which is going to harm us. Distrust and skepticism can be scientific. It is scientific. So distrust is a good thing. But paranoia and suspicion based on nothing more than hysteria and emotions is really bad. So whenever people come to tell me, I don't trust the vaccine, I'm like, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. You don't trust the vaccine. You don't take their word for anything. So you can determine for yourself, what are some valid resources? What are some valid reference points? What are some valid researchers, journalists, outlook? And then don't trust them either. So if you see a journalist write a report and then say, well, who do you work for? Who pays your check? What news outlet do you work for? And how do you guys get your funding? You can go all the way down the rabbit hole. I got mad respect for people who do that. But I have no respect for people who's like, I don't trust it. Why? Because I don't believe it. Why? Because it ain't real. How do you know that? Because I know in my heart. I can't get down like that. So when I see black folks saying, I don't trust the system, Tuskegee, I'm like, okay, that's valid. So what's your verification process? What? You don't just stop at distrust. You either have to dismantle. If someone makes a claim, this vaccine is safe and effective, and you say, I don't trust it because it's Tuskegee, you can't walk away. That's step one, distrust. Then you say, well, they made a claim. Can you invalidate their claim? You say you don't trust it. Then you embark on the path of invalidation. But you can't say Tuskegee as a means to say, well, I'm going to dismiss all of this. And what's most contradictory, what's most annoying with people calling on Tuskegee in opposition to this vax is the two phenomenon are completely almost opposite in every way. What do I mean? First of all, if you look at the Tuskegee study, it wasn't even an experiment. It was a study formally. People call it an experiment, but that's a misnomer. But I'm just going to go over just a few of the characteristics of the Tuskegee study versus vaccine paranoia. Now, if you don't have vaccine, I know a lot of people who don't want to get the vaccine, who are, as I say, evaluating, following the peer review literature, and they draw, if you're drawing educated, informed conclusions about your personal health, I'm not talking to you. But the people who are just simply dismissing this without trying to validate or invalidate the claims that they accept or reject, this is who I'm talking to. This is who need to listen. Everybody listen so you can talk to these people. First of all, Tuskegee. If you say you don't trust Tuskegee, you don't be the vax. The Tuskegee experiment was basically 600 black men, which really by extension, 600 black families in rural Alabama. And statistically, the study says of the 600 black people who were part of the study, formerly black men who were formerly part of the study, 128 died. I think that was a hyper conservative number. I don't trust that number because I don't think they only factor in the 600 men, not their sex partners and their offspring and their offspring's offspring. So there were 600 black men isolated to a rural community in Alabama who were part of this study, whereas the vaccine is nationwide and global. So it's really difficult to compare and contrast an isolated regional study to a global campaign. The logistics, the aims, and the outcomes are much too distant. Number two, the Tuskegee study sought to deny treatment. They sought to withhold treatment, not to compel people to give treatment. When people went in for treatment, they were given sugar pills or saline injections. They weren't given any type of medicine. Whereas the COVID vaccine seeks to give treatment. Two separate things. Those are literally two opposite things. And the Tuskegee study, the advocates for the 600 black men were literally fighting in order to give them. So in order for the Tuskegee to be a true reference or a true historical example of the COVID vax, That means they would have to be denying black people the vaccine. Or when black folks go in for the vaccine, they would have to be giving us placebos, injecting us with water or some other inert substance. So if you think what they did this in Tuskegee, if you think they're doing now what they did in Tuskegee, that means you would be fine with going to get the injection because they're not going to give you treatment. It's going to be a pretend treatment. It's going to be a fake treatment. And finally, Tuskegee was denying black men because penicillin, purified penicillin, wasn't available until 1940. The Tuskegee experiment started 8 years before there was treatment, but there wasn't a cure. So they denied black men treatment for syphilis in order to observe and document the disease progression in a population, which is a crime that no one has been to jail for. Our community, our people, the descendants of those 600 black men all deserve reparations above and in addition to slave Jim Crow discrimination reparations. It was a crime against humanity. But at that time, within 8 years within that study, they had purified penicillin, which was a brand new drug that had not had a wide distribution. It was a brand new experimental process to create this purified penicillin that was not just used for syphilis, but most bacterial diseases, meningitis, sepsism, and for septic infections, and syphilis, gonorrhea. It was a miracle drug that seemed to come out of nowhere, and it was created using processes that most folks did not understand, and that purified penicillin in 1940. And when this purified penicillin came to be, they denied those 600 black men who had been part of this study for 1932 to 40, for 8 years. They could have, within 8 years, wiped out the syphilis infection in that population, but they chose to go all the way on to the 1970s with observing these diseases ravaging these individuals. So in the Tuskegee situation, they were fighting for and advocating that these black men receive this new drug that came out of a new process that the recipients didn't understand. They were fighting to receive it, whereas the anti-COVID vaccination population are fighting to reject it, saying, I don't trust it. I mean, these are just a few. And my issue is black suffering is not a meme. Our suffering and the plight of our people is not a damn meme. So when you speak about the atrocities that African people have endured, you need to have a level of reverence and respect. And if you're going to apply our history, as Malcolm X said, of all courses of study, history is best qualified to reward our efforts. And as conscious black people, we know that the accurate retelling of our history is essential to our understandings of who we are and essential to mapping our way towards liberation and empowerment. So all I'm saying is if you're going to make a reference of black history and you're going to recall on our ancestors who had suffered at the hands of this beast, at least be accurate. At least be accurate. That's all I'm asking. Be accurate in your historical comparison. And if you're going to use our struggles and plight of the past, make sure they're applicable to the conditions of the present, if for no other reason, out of respect for what our people been through, and at least have some proper education for our youth. And I didn't want to even go into this, I brought it up to my wife weeks ago. And I'm like, why are people calling on Tuskegee in opposition to the COVID vax? I'm not saying don't be in opposition to the COVID vax. I think it's irresponsible to tell people run and get the shot. I think it's irresponsible to tell people not to get the shot. I think what is responsible is to tell people whatever you decide, you need to make an educated guess. The educated guess. You need to be educate yourself, assess the risk, assess the potential exposure, assess the potential outcomes, and make an intelligent, informed decision and be prepared to deal with the consequences. Be an adult about it. But people on both sides of this issue, which is why I just so hard to make friends. I wish I could just go to one side or the other of the issues, but most issues are more nuanced than that. I wish I could be like a lot of these people, absolutist, be all on this or all on that, all on the pole. But the way my mind is set up, trying to maintain a rational assessment, a rational analysis does not allow me to often join either camp of a conflict, to fully embrace either side of a conflict. But I digress. All I'm saying, you can't really, the current vaccine, even if the current global vaccine campaign was a grand conspiracy, it is not the same. It is not comparable to the Tuskegee study. In fact, it is the opposite. So if you're going to make a comparison, or if you're going to what we call evoke, some of y'all really believe when you call on the ancestors, the ancestors respond. So imagine you're an ancestor and somebody calling your name for something that ain't got nothing to do with you. You calling the name, they calling out your plight, and they don't even properly articulate what you went through. That's disrespect. So one more time, one more again, I'm going to say it's appropriate to say the Tuskegee study is the root of my distrust of U.S. institutions, mainly the institutions that claim to come and be concerned about our public health. I don't trust the U.S. public health infrastructure. That is a valid conclusion. It is invalid to say, I'm not going to get that vaccine because of Tuskegee, because those are two unrelated conspiracies. If indeed the COVID vax, they're two divergent, almost opposite, from one being regional, isolated, to one being global. One being trying to give treatment, one being denying treatment. One seeking to receive a new technology, a new treatment, one seeking to reject a new treatment. They are opposite. So you can use for overall distrust and suspicion and skepticism. You cannot use it for justification for saying, I don't want. So you just have to get another justification. You just need a different rationale, and you need to respect what our ancestors been through. And what's so tragic about this, and I'm going to leave it alone after this, is that there are literally countless overlaps or history where there was actual experimentation, actual mass exposures in the United States where the government would expose the whole nation or entire communities to toxic, harmful substances for everything from military, to improve military tactics, to increase profits of corporations. And nobody's referencing those. There's a book called Acres of Skin that talks about the Holmesburg prison experiment, where they would come and test biochemical weapons on inmates. And that's the thing where they say, go down to the clinic and we're going to give you some medicine to help you with your issue. They're doing that to this day. I had a friend who came out of prison, and before he went into prison, he was kind of a health nut. This dude would work out every day. He did martial arts. He ate a vegan diet. He used to meditate. He would experiment with herbs, not really experiment, but he had all these herbs, and he was a member of the Asar Set Society. And, they're very much into herbal remedies and natural living and stuff like that. A super health nut. And he went to prison. And he said when he was in the prison, he requested a vegetarian or vegan diet, and he said he tried to stay as healthy as possible, and he said it just wasn't possible. He developed these lesions on his skin and all that, and he said they would wake him up out of his cell and send him down to the prison infirmary and inject substances into his arm. There was no informed consent. He wasn't able to see the container. He wasn't able to get any information. He would just go down there. They'd inject stuff in his arm, and they'd take blood, and they wouldn't give him any information about. So there's experimentation going on. But the one in Hamburg, Pennsylvania, in for 20 years, the military would run tests on incarcerated black men to test bioweapons. There's been whole regions of the United States where the U.S. government has allowed nuclear fallout to expose whole islands, the Bikini Atoll, where they would explode these atom bombs and let the nuclear ash rain down on the people. So there have been experimentation and massive nationwide experiment, and nobody referenced those, where they were giving false treatment, where they were giving known dangerous and untested treatment to population. Nobody referenced those. Everybody just goes Tuskegee. When Tuskegee was a study that denied treatment to our people, that they didn't give, they actually refused to give us. So many of y'all would have been down with Tuskegee. Many of you people who are against the vaccine were like, yeah, what's this penicillin? Yeah, penicillin's common now, but in 1930s, nobody knew what penicillin was. So if you were around in the 1930s and the CDC said, we got this stuff called purified penicillin, give me your arm. Nope, I ain't getting that. You a drone, you a sheep getting that penicillin. So you would actually be in favor of the methodology of the Tuskegee, saying we're not going to give this new experimental treatment to these colored folks. So I'm just saying, be accurate in your analysis. Be skeptical. Because I know some of y'all, despite everything I said here, going to be like, yeah, Diallo wants everybody to go give it. Diallo trust these white folks. And forget everything I said about how to be properly suspicious, proper paranoia, proper skepticism. You're going to just not hear anything but me say, these are not two historically parallel events or phenomena. They're actually divergent historical events. But you don't hear me though. Okay, one more thing, and then we're going to talk about breaking the genocide cycle. And as I was researching breaking the genocide cycle, it's pretty simple what we need to do to break the genocide cycle. I thought it'd be complex, but it's a pretty simple process. But anyway, one more thing. And again, I'm a people person. I don't want y'all to hate me. But I understand if you do. This black excellence stuff. There's this meme that I saw the other day that rubbed me the wrong way. And it says, if you use GPS in your car, then you need to bow down and thank and give reverence and honor to this black woman who invented GPS by the name of Dr. Gladys West, who is a mathematician, a genius. Now, I don't think she's a genius, even though she's utterly brilliant, unspeakable brilliant, Einstein level intellect, but I wouldn't call her a genius, and I'll try to explain why. Bobby E. Wright said education and Kwame Ture. Now, I heard this from Bobby E. Wright and Kwame Ture. They pretty much said the same thing, but they didn't cite each other. So maybe, great minds think alike, and they came to these conclusions separately, even though it's the same thing. But they both asserted, Kwame Ture and Dr. Bobby E. Wright, that education equips you to serve the interests of your people and community, whereas training equips you to serve the interests of others. So you can't be a truly educated person if all your intellect goes to the interest and service of another community, especially if that community is hostile or oppressing your community. You are trained, you are not educated, because at the core of education is making rational decisions, not just having technological skills or abilities and talents, but knowing how to properly utilize those and when and where to utilize those. So Gladys West, she didn't invent GPS, but she did something even more complex than that. GPS would not exist if not for her experiments and research. So I guess her biography actually says that she was crucial to the development, not the inventor of. Because like most things, most technological advancements, there is no one great man, no Elon Musk, no one great woman who goes and just says, I'm going to invent this. Most inventors take the sum of human ingenuity and put it together. They use parts from things that already exist to put them together in a way for that's why this whole concept of the great man is a fallacy. The great inventor, the great mind, all human intellect is a byproduct or a convergence of all other human intellect. So this individualist notion of, hey, I created this is a fallacy. She actually was an expert in satellite geodesy or geodesy, which means she worked on Earth's position and navigate, studying Earth's position and navigation, Earth's gravity fields, geodynamical phenomenon like crustal dynamics and polar motions. She basically studied the composition and movement of the Earth and how various phenomenon impacted the movement of the Earth, from gravitational pull to the shifting polar ice caps and concentration of geological density. So she was really smart. And she would develop these mathematical formulas to calculate how and where the Earth was going to move on a massive scale. And she was doing this before there were smartphones and Google and all. She was doing this with microfiche and encyclopedias. She didn't even have a computer where she had to hold a lot of this in her own head. Brilliant black woman. And without her research, without her formulas, without her conclusions, we wouldn't have GPS. But what is GPS? GPS has been around for decades. And the GPS was funded by the US military. Now, people like to talk about NASA because it's not the military, it's its own independent government agency. But you ever notice when there's a NASA flight, when they go to the moon, they're always military people? Whenever you go and see the various astronauts make public appearances, they're wearing military uniform. I think it's such a scam for the US government to pretend like NASA is not a branch of the US military. It's such a scam. And I think one of the main reasons they separate NASA from the military is for budgeted reasons. So the United States can pretend not to spend as much on the military as they do. But most of NASA's research and breakthroughs go straight through DARPA and the US military. So anyway, the US uses military. The original use of the GPS system was for intercontinental ballistic missiles. Meaning, how do I get a nuclear warhead that launches from a silo in Oklahoma to land in a country or to land on a village in China or communist Russia or on a guerrilla camp somewhere in Africa. They use GPS. This black woman facilitated giving the European colonizers the ability to kill anybody on the planet, anywhere at any time. And there was no drone technology at that time, but the GPS infrastructure was in place so that when drone technology was developed, it is drones that allows these unmanned bombers. So they don't have to launch the missile from Utah. They can launch the missile from a drone and pinpoint and blow up children, women, quote unquote insurgents. And what makes you an insurgent? Well, there's an alien foreign military on my soil, and I don't want a foreign military on my soil. Who does? Can you imagine looking out the window of your office, of your home, of your car right now and seeing a armed man or a group of armed men who don't speak your language, who don't know your culture, who are not citizens, residents, or migrants to your country, but are here under the orders of a foreign government? Can you imagine what it's like to look at that? The United States has over 200 known bases. There are more U.S. military bases across the globe than there are countries across the globe. The United States has military bases and military presence in almost every country, except for China, North Korea, because they even have a military base on Cuba, and Cuba says, please go away, and the United States say, nah, we good. But how many foreign countries have bases on U.S. soil? Zero. Hypocritical to me. But anyway, this black woman, Gladys, Dr. Gladys West, is not someone I think should be celebrated. Yes, I use GPS, but when me, Sage, when we get in that little hatchback, that Chevette hatchback, and go to a rave in Oklahoma, or go to a concert in St. Louis, we just use road maps. And I would gladly go back to road maps if it meant denying Europeans the ability to send armed drones or nuclear warheads to any point on the globe at any time. I gladly make that trade-off. So it's really weird to me that black people are like, yeah, yay, Gladys. Like, what the blood clot is black excellence? And not only did that, let's say, because some of y'all don't care. Y'all trust these people with these bombs. Y'all think they should have the capacity to play God over us. But let's say, are there any black-owned cellular, GPS, satellite? Do black people, do African people have any type of stake in the GPS infrastructure and manufacturing and distribute GPS technology? The only stake we have is that in the Congo, black children are being forced through slave and starvation wages to go in and extract the coltan and other minerals and phosphors needed to fuel and sustain this technology. Outside of that, what stake do we have? So why is this something to celebrate? If anybody, we should see white people, and not just any white folks, but imperialistic, militaristic, racist white people. She should be a hero to them, because that's who she served. That's who's profiting from her technology, not us. I just think it's weird that no matter what a black person does, if they do it, we celebrate it. That's menticide to me. If you say a black person did something great, yay, and like, wait, what did they do? And who benefited? Cui bono, who profits? What has been the short-term, long-term, and potential impact of what they did? And I think if we just celebrate any black person that gets a title, and really, black praise is always, which is tragic, is a byproduct of white praise. Well, hey, that black person carries the favor of our oppressor, and our oppressor sure is impressed with that black person. So, of course, we should love them too. We can't get free like that. We got to have our own standards. We need to define independently, and not just independently. We need to define black excellence and opposition to capitalism, colonization, imperialism, white domination. It needs to be an opposition to. So a black person, I did something great. Say, hey, how did it harm, obstruct, disrupt the power structure? Huh? How does whatever the great thing you did harm, obstruct, disrupt the white power structure? Well, it doesn't. It actually profits them and actually helps the white. But then I don't care what you invented. I don't care how high you jumped, how many balls you dunked, how many 4 or 5 3-pointers you hit. I don't care, because ultimately you're just further entrenching our oppression. And how can you be a great black person when the great thing that you did further empowers and entrenches us, empowers our oppressor and entrenches us in oppression? How can you be celebrated? I don't care if you cure cancer. If you cure cancer and then you take that cure for cancer and give it over to the pharmaceutical industry and allow the pharmaceutical industry to sell it or off to the highest bidder, and so that poor and working class black people who get cancer can't afford the treatment, but all these rich white colonizers who get cancer get the cure and get to continue to amass profit and oppress us. You just extending the lives of evil rich white folks. Who gives a shit? So if you are an oppressed person and you invent a cure for cancer, you also have to work with others to create a mechanism that it can't be concentrated, that it can't be monopolized, that it can be distributed amongst the masses of the people at low to no cost. But if you invent something and then you just plug it into the capitalist economy, go to hell. If you invent a technology and you hand it over to the US military, go to hell. And no disrespect to Gladys. I'm talking to the people who praise. Gladys had a job to do. She's like the Nazis who went to Nuremberg. It's like, I was just doing my job. Now, even white folks say just doing your job does not excuse you or make you exempt from the crimes that your job facilitated. So all the intercontinental ballistic missiles, all the drone bombings, is she responsible? I don't know. I'm not a legal guy. I don't do legal like. But I will say this: she shouldn't be a hero. I don't know why y'all sharing this memes. Why you girl boss, black girl magic, black excellent Negroes integrationists explain to me specifically how a black woman playing a central role in developing GPS for the US military got anything to do with black folks or something that black people should celebrate. We can easily find, yes, I just went to my grandmother's funeral and I used GPS to get there. But like I said, I'm old. I'm an old black man. So I lived in a time pre-GPS and I got around just fine, thank you. And if the trade-off for having GPS, having that convenience, is allowing Europeans to murder anybody on the planet at their whim using that technology, I gladly do and bow out. Hand it, give it back. Cancel. Now let me talk about, Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle complaining about cancel culture. And last night I listened to that Dave Chappelle podcast with Mos Def, Talib Kweli, and Mos Def, Talib, and Dave Chappelle. 3 millionaires sitting talking, trying to talk down home talk. Who y'all think y'all fooling? Man, the first thing I thought listening to Dave Chappelle say, and here I am on my own podcast, hating. Yes, hateration. If you're on that positive energy, no negative energy, just mute me for a minute and I'm moving on. But it was horrible. It hurt me. Listening to that, my first thought was, shut up, rich niggas. Rich niggas, shut up. And I hate to be this way. But the Midnight Miracle podcast, here you are, wealthy black men with a lot of leisure time to study, to research, to travel. Dave Chappelle is one of the most beloved black men in the modern history. And he could put in a call to all these black scholars, all these black intellects, all these black freedom fighters and say, hey, come holla at me. But you called 2 other millionaires to come talk to you. You could have, each 3 of those black men could start 3 independent podcasts and platform somebody with something to say because they had nothing to say. I love, you name a Mos Def song. You name a Black Star song and see if I don't bust it out and start know the lyrics. You start a Dave Chappelle joke and I can finish it. I'm fans of these dudes. I think they're talented. And I was down with Black Star way back before they was doing arenas, before they were hip hop legends. Back, I know you listening, Talib, most. Back when y'all was doing them little struggle shows at Mega Everest College in Brooklyn, I was there. I was there back in the 90s. When y'all was at Nkuru Books, I was there buying from y'all bookstore. So I ain't hating. I'm hating, but it's hate that I've earned the capacity to hate on y'all. Y'all ain't got nothing to say. First of all, everything it was like Islamic propaganda. Y'all, how are you black people selling Islam to other black people? That rubs me the wrong way. It's bad enough we got Farrakhan hustling and recruiting black folks into this colonizer's religion, slave religion. But it was Islam. They all are using, Islamic rhetoric, thinking they being woke because you Muslim. You ain't been woke Muslim since the mid-90s. We figured out it wasn't woke to be Muslim. It wasn't conscious to be. We got past that in the 90s. Y'all still pushing that in the 2020s. And then y'all just saying all this vacuous stuff. Oh, just believe in yourself. Yeah, and you just adversity and love. Just like, man, what? You dudes, I'm sure y'all got full calendars. I'm sure y'all phones are just ringing off the hook. Y'all got schedules. Y'all got personal assistants and 4-5 phones full of data and calendar stuff. And y'all gonna come and waste your own time. Man, you wasted my time, but I'm not an icon. I'm not a legend. Why are you wasting your own time? That's horrible. So I'm gonna say one podcaster to another, since we all doing the same thing here. Find something to talk about or shut the hell up. Like, it's real stuff going on. And don't go, I mean, the whole booty nonsense. The minstrel show, the Breakfast Club we got enough minstrel show people jawboning about celebrity tabloid nonsense. But you guys have maintained the persona of being woke, being conscious, being intelligent, having very critical minds and eyes. That didn't come through on the first 2 episodes. If you want my notes, after I do my BroDiallo broadcast, I can send y'all my notes and y'all can just see, because I never get to everything I want to talk about. It's real Palestine stuff. It's so much stuff here. Talk about more victims of police atrocities, but I run out of time. So I will, holla at me for free, even though all y'all got $1 million. 3 millionaires talking to a bunch of oppressed, poor, and working class folks. But, like America makes us think every poor man in this country thinks they're just temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Every black person, they convince all you black folks, you were born struggle, but you're going to die a millionaire. At any day now, through your hard work, y'all going to be rich. Anyway, find something to talk about or shut up. And I know you're rich. You're not used to nobody talking to you like this. But I mean, if you got access to most of them. And Jerobi was on there. Y'all got some legendary brothers on there. I love Jerobi. I love the Tribe Called Quest. Black Star, Dave Chappelle. I'm like, wow, and I wouldn't listen to this and like, word, this how y'all gonna do me? Just, yeah, love yourself. And most deaf, shame on y'all. Should know better. Most deaf spent years living on the African continent, South Africa, Nigeria. Can you give us update what's going on the continent? I mean, just a whole bunch of nothing. And I'm like, is it just because y'all got such little regard and respect for the intelligence of the black community? Because you definitely didn't go to the, like I said, it wasn't a minstrel show, but it was some of the most vacuous, inane commentary I've heard in a long time. This pseudo Islamic spirituality, and even if y'all want to just give us back in the day insider stories, like I said, there's enough YouTube and podcasts talking about, reminiscing about back in the day. Oh, I remember this. We all got our own back in the days. Can you make it relevant to what we going through today? I don't know. But you call it a Midnight Miracle podcast. That's a goofy name too. Grown ass black man, Midnight Miracle. That sounds like a gospel play for Christmas. I just, man, listen, holla at me. Give me $11.50. Send me a consultation check. I'll get that Midnight Miracle right together. First thing I would do is change the name Midnight Miracle. Y'all just been rich, like Muda Baruka. It's not good to stay in a white man country too long. Y'all done gone soft. So first thing I would do is change the name. Sound like a gospel play, the Midnight Miracle first. Second thing I would do is just give y'all a list of topics to talk about. And then third thing I would do was forbidden things. You can't talk about Islam and use Islamic phraseology. Stop pushing Islam in the hood. Malcolm said, keep your religion in the closet. So I'd stop all that pseudo spirituality, Islamic mysticism talk y'all was doing. That's the third thing I do. That's three. Three free consultations. And holla at me, give me $11.50, and I'll give you a full consultation. Anyway, breaking the genocide cycle. I didn't want to talk about it. I wrote it in my notes, I scratched it out, and then I wrote it again. But oh man, listen. Chappelle's kind of a big dude. I don't think I could whoop him. And Talib just seems like one of them dudes, quiet dudes that has like a silent rage inside him. I know you, so I can, but I think I could take Most Def. I was so annoyed that I sit and listen to that podcast. I'd swing on Most Def. That's how things do. In my crew, and then I had a crew. In my crew, it was four of us in the Corps. Sage, who was 6'3", he was a dancer, so he had dancers are very sinewy, like athletic build. And there was Rip the Crip, Rip T, Fresh, the big homie, my best friend from childhood. He wasn't tall, but he was built like a tank, very muscular cat. And then there was this little pipsqueak named Troy. He's like 5'2", 78 pounds in high school. And then me, I'm not a big guy. I'm 6'3", but I don't carry no bulk. And so whenever we be out hanging out playing basketball in Loose Park, trying to chase after the white women's holla, when we be out and about in Kansas, it wasn't a lot. Don't blame me. There wasn't a lot of outlets for black males in Kansas City in the 90s. But anyway, when I'd be hanging out, anytime we got into a conflict, the first guy they would target would be Troy. Because they didn't want smoke from Sage, from Rip, or me. They'd always literally, me and the rest of the crew could be talking all crap. We could be playing ball and hacking people. And soon as stuff started to move towards confrontation, they would all target him. And we didn't pay attention to it. But one day he pointed it out. Every time we get into some mess, they come after me. They always focus on and target me. And lo and behold, I started paying attention. Like, word, that's wild. I would do. If I came up on the Midnight Miracle podcast and flipped over their table, I think I would have to go at most. I think that's my best chance. I wouldn't punch him. I'd shake him by the shoulders. Like, what are y'all doing? Shut up, rich niggas. But like Chappelle, I don't know what happened to him. He got swole. Initially, if it was like back in the Chappelle show days 20 years ago, definitely I'd grab Chappelle and shake him. But he's big now. He's a big dude, bulky dude. So I wouldn't shake him, but he smokes. Smokes cigarettes. I don't know. Don't listen to me. I'm just contemplating on which one of the miracle. I know Jerobi, he's a chef. That's a bulky dude. I grew up fighting. All my uncles are fat dudes. So I don't ever want to fat person again in my life. It's so unpleasant. They're so strong. They're so strong. But so Jerobi, I couldn't take him. But like I said, Talib is like one of them quiet, low-key rage balls. So definitely. So most, I just go and shake them. Like, what is wrong with y'all? Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Done. I should just go off the air now. Anyway, that's a serious topic. That's just my opinion, my review of the miracle. But they 2 episodes in, so if you go back and listen to episode 1 or episode 2 of the BroDiallo broadcast, I'm sure it was probably horrible too, unlike the quality, consistent programming that I put out today. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah. Anyway, you can go to diallokenyatta.com and there you'll find all my writings, blog posts, and my pontifications, review, all that. So go to diallokenyatta.com. And there are also opportunities for you to support the broadcast because I ain't got no $1,000,000. I'm so poor I can't pay attention. So if you could help me, Patreon. I'm here only because of my Patreons. Wouldn't be no BroDiallo without Patreons, but you can also Cash App, Venmo, and all that. $ BroDiallo. And what's the other ways you can support? You can like, share, subscribe, get the word out, be part of the BroDiallo Street team, give me some free publicity. There's all kind of ways to contribute. So I can make my first $1,000,000 and then I can sit up and be like, it's about your essence. And and if your vibe ain't strong, then it's about love. And if the love don't disconnect, then you don't really have to touch. And then the high level of radiance that comes from our inner melanin cycle cells. Because like who I could just stay in bed. I wouldn't get up first thing in the morning and just talk a whole bunch of nothing. I'd rather just stay in bed. I guess they're bored. They ain't been able to tour. And Dave Chappelle with all that money go live in the middle of a rural white neighborhood. Weird. Cass is weird. I think money makes you weird. That's why I'm so on the level. That's why I'm so down home. I'm so hood because I'm broke. And that's what keeps you there. That's why I stay broke. On purpose, so I don't become a weirdo. Anyway, BroDiallo Show Q4 Radio. It is now 8:38 in the EM in the city of Chirac. Breaking the genocide cycle. I talked about what genocide is, what it isn't, some historical references over the last couple of episodes, but now I'm saying we have to break the genocide cycle because as the Earth's atmosphere continues to fill up with carbon from industrial pollution, we will be experiencing more frequent and damaging storms and floods. We will have droughts, polar ice caps melting, which means a lot of fresh water will be inundated with salt water, and the earth is on its verge of climate calamity. So not only will there be limited space for humans to live, there will be even more limitations on where we are able to grow and harvest food. And on top of that, we have an economy that is one of the worst that is very good at mass production, but is very bad at just distribution of all the resources we produce. And so as a result, the US military and other first world nations, instead of reducing or ending the carbon emission, instead of healing ecosystems, instead of reestablishing biodiversity, what these various countries are doing are setting up what they call fortress nations. They're militarizing their borders and developing technologies to exclude certain populations from getting into their countries and to police and corral people within the country. So the year 2000, between 2000 and 2100, is on par to be more violent, more deadly than the 1900 up to 2000. This next century has already given us some of the most violent, long-lasting conflicts, such as the war in Afghanistan, the war in Yemen, the ongoing Palestinian genocide, ethnic conflicts from Zimbabwe to South Africa, aka Tanzania, political instability and uprisings in Haiti and Nigeria. The world is a ghetto. And this is coming on the heels of the first George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan telling the world, if the Iron Curtain falls and the scourge of communism is no longer a specter on the free nations, we will experience peace and prosperity once the world embraces capitalism. Margaret Thatcher said, we have to understand that there is no alternative. Tina, Tina, there is no alternative to capitalism. And therefore, once the world realizes and stops messing around with socialism, nationalization of resources, companies, and economies, once the world embraces the free market will directly translate into free people. Most people didn't believe that. Most people I knew they were wrong. But many people did believe that. Many people still believe that, even though we've had almost half a century of evidence of capitalist domination with very little, a few alternatives. We went to a few alternatives to capitalism, to no alternatives to capitalism, and the world becomes more warlike. And we understand that wars now, due to human innovations and technologies, all wars are wars of genocide now. Every war is a war of genocide because of the quality of weapons, the distribution of weapons, and the concentration of population. And during World War I, prior to World War I, most people lived very dispersed lives. So if you lived in the country, more likely you lived in a rural area. More likely than not, you worked in agriculture. More likely than not, you would maybe visit this big city once or twice in your life, but generally stay in open, pristine agricultural area. So if there was a conflict in your country, if the cities were bombed or there were pitched battles between military forces, you would hear about it in the news, or you might see it in the distant horizon, smoke rising off the horizon. But since the advance of industrial capitalism, humans have concentrated our population. More and more humans live in congested large cities and slums. And more military battles are no longer fought between two armies, but fought between imperialist armies and insurgent guerrillas and not asymmetrical fighters. And because of that, the wars and conflicts and bombings have gone from being carried out in open battle. A battlefield literally would be a large open space where two generals or two nations would bring their armies to engage in a murder orgy. But now the battlefields are block by block in the urban core. And because of that, and prior to World War One, in most conflicts, the Napoleonic Wars, in the wars of old and conflicts of nations prior to industrialization, prior to humans going from mostly working in rural areas in agriculture and working in workshops to working in large factories and living in cities, most people who died in military conflict were soldiers. So if you had a military conflict, 80 to 90% of the people who die would be soldiers. Collateral damage, civilian infrastructures and civilians would probably be about 20% of those who died. In modern conflict, 80 to 90% of the people who die are non-combatants, are civilians. The majority of the target are civilian infrastructures, even though the UN conference stated that it is against the law, international law, to target civilian infrastructure in a conflict. Israel just did it, middle finger to the world. And you're anti-Semitic if you acknowledge that Israel is engaged in genocidal war crimes. So be it, I guess. That's the new definition of anti-Semite. And we're going to also ignore the many Israelis
The many prominent Jews, historians, scholars, social scientists that are also saying that Israel is committing war crimes, but I. And so we are on par to have many instances of genocidal conflict, but we don't call it genocide anymore more because that word hurts people's feelings. Now we call it ethnic cleansing, displacement. Even massacre is starting to come back. There have been massacres. But these genocides are on par unless humanity makes some stark changes to increase, to intensify, to spread, and eventually show up on your doorstep. So even if you give no F's, even if you've been like, what do I care in Palestine, and you're dumb enough to believe the fiction that they've been fighting over there for thousands of years. The Palestinian Israeli conflict is not a 1,000-year-old conflict. It's not even 100-year-old conflict. It is a modern conflict. And then one more thing about this real Jew stuff. Because every time Israel starts to wild out, it's a bunch of crazy black people that get on there and say, who the real Jews? We the real Jews. They the real Jews. Real Jews, fake Jews. Let me tell you, every single Jew on planet Earth is a fake Jew. And here's why. The Jewish myth is that God made a covenant with Abraham, God's chosen people. So, in order to be a real Jew, Abraham will have had to have existed, and he didn't. Moses would have had to have existed, and he didn't. And God would have to have existed, and he doesn't. So, trying to determine who is the real Jew is no different than trying to determine whether Superman can beat up Spider Man. It's fiction. So you look real stupid trying to wrestle away the title of the real and something that can't be and isn't real because the very premise of what a Jew is or who the Jewish people are based in mythology, folklore, and fiction. So the real questions that we argue is not who are the real Jews and who the land was promised to. What we have to argue was Palestine was a sovereign nation that came under British colonialism. And after World War II, it became a protectorate, and then the Western European powers facilitated one population of white folks to take over this land. And then these people, after the fall of the Iron Curtain, the vast majority of people who live in Israel come from the former Soviet bloc nation. They are Eastern Europeans with no historical, biological, cultural connection to that land whatsoever. It is settler colonialism. So for them to say we're the real Jews is as absurd as the Mormons who say they're the Native Americans. If you know anything about the Book of Mormon and Mormon mythology, they believe they're the Native Americans and believe that Jesus came to America to tell them to be Mormons. It's all make believe. But I don't care if you're using historical facts or delusional fiction to justify what you're doing. An atrocity is an atrocity is an atrocity. And here's Dr. Mingo. What you doing up so early? Are you going out? Oh, you have an in-person appointment? Oh. I wanted to go with you. Well, can I go? When are you leaving? I got a show to do. Man, let me tell y'all something, young brothers. Go and take that Dr. Umar class on alpha malehood before you end up like me having to negotiate all this mess. Anyway, coming interrupting my show. As I was saying, breaking the genocide cycle. Lord, I'm not going to do this. Let me just tell y'all what we need to do to break the genocide cycle. We have to end industrial capitalism, global white domination, and decentralize production and wealth. We have to redistribute the world's resources, dismantle the Western powers, and abolish capitalism. We basically need socialism and anarchy. We need to reduce the power and influence of hierarchical structures. We also have to devangelize the population, meaning that religious institutions also need to be deprived of their legitimacy and power. We have to restore the ecology and ecosystem and biodiversity. And finally, we need correct education. We need people to be properly informed and properly instructed about everything from science and evolution to history and culture. As long as humanity exists under so many delusions, from there being a chosen people by an omnipotent God to paper and Bitcoin actually has value in the real world. As long as we live under delusions, we will, it was Voltaire says, as long as you can get people to believe absurdities, you can convince them to commit atrocities. So the absurdities of the world, the megalomaniacs, the cults of the world have to lose legitimacy. And we have to create social, cultural, economic environments where it's very difficult to centralize power, to engage in mass deception and indoctrination. The solution to genocide ultimately is anarchy, and true political anarchy. Anarchy is not chaos. Anarchy, it means without hierarchy, without elites, without people, a system. You can have governance under anarchy. You can have economics and markets under anarchy. You can even have instruction. You can even have policing and consequences for violating the peace and stability of a community under anarchy. The only thing you can't have under an anarcho system is people having unjust power over other people. That's the only thing that anarchy excludes. You can have technology, but anarchy has been demonized more aggressively than communism, than socialism, than atheism. There is no political ideology that has been more demonized that the oppressors and elites fear more than anarchy. Now, I'm not an anarchist because I think that humanity is so far gone that we will have to, like Karl Marx said, it's going to take stages. Liberation is going to have to come in stages. It ain't okay, today we free. I mean, slaves, tomorrow we free. That's what happened in the Haitian Revolution. And we see Haiti is still struggling in freedom. So I think that as oppression was a long, drawn out process, liberation is a process. It's not an event. I said, as Dale Jones, quoting Dale, liberation is a process. It's not an event. It's not going to be some grand uprising, then we free. It's going to be a long process where we have to transform our very concepts of reality, of value, what is worth, what is cost. So we need cultural revolution, social revolution, economic revolution, and military revolution. We need full scale revolution. So I wanted to break these things down, but socialism, anarchy, demilitarization, devangelism, the loss of legitimacy. You can have your spirituality, but you cannot have a powerful institution based on religious delusion. Devangelism, ecology, restoration of biodiversity, and correct education. And in the Q&A Wednesday, we will discuss it in more detail. Um, we will discuss it. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you look at the bottom of your screen, you see ways to support and sustain the BroDiallo broadcast. Shout out to everybody. Like my last Q&A was a good Q&A. I was proud of it. And shout out to the people who cash apped me after that. Big up, big up. You know, I can never be a millionaire because I'm a redistributor. So, you don't have to worry about me, but I still appreciate your support and input. This is Bro Diallo. This is Q4 Radio. I'm going to um have to end just slightly early because because Dr. Mingo has an appointment and she has to be there at 9. So I'm gonna end just slightly early, which is good. Make up for all them times I went over, because I went over last week. I go over a lot. So the few times that I stay under make up for it. Kind of like you're in an abusive relationship and he's verbally or physically abusive and then brings you flowers and be like, hey, the flowers make up for all the bad times. That's kind of. But I don't want to be like that. I want to be on the up. I want to be professional. So anyway, Q4 Radio, BroDiallo Show, DialloKenyatta.com, Diallo Kenyatta, Patreon/Diallo Kenyatta, at Diallo Kenyatta across social media. I'll be back Wednesday. The book review for Amos Wilson, Black on Black Violence, has been completed, has been taped, has been edited, and will be posted. At latest, I'll post it tomorrow. The BroDiallo book review. And we're also, thanks to my supporters, and they cash at me. So I'm going to start doing TV and media reviews. And it'll be better. It ain't just going to be me complaining like with the Midnight Miracle podcast. It could do better. There's so much talent there going to waste. Do better, Dave. Or stick to comedy and rap it. Just rap and tell jokes and don't talk about life and society. But anyway, I think that's it. So we're gonna go out with one of my favorite tunes, "Uptown Top Ranking" by Althea and Donna. And I will see y'all on the Bro Diallo broadcast next week. And the topic for next week will be the miseducation of a Pan African. You don't want to miss that broadcast. The miseducation of a Pan African.